Thank you so much for coming along to the economic examination. I'm Rhianna Dhillon and I am joined by a wonderful panel here to talk about financing. So perhaps you could all introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hello, my name's Kate Shenton. I am a writer-director. My love and passion is the horror genre, particularly horror comedy. I have a very dark sense of humour. My background is I made a no-budget feature film called Egomaniac, which I made for about £5,000. I've also made a number of shorts that have played international film festivals all around the world, and I'm currently in development on a feature film called Bloody Burrito, and I've just shot a web series as well. So moving on to bigger budgets, but still got a bit of no budget roots in my heart.
A hard act to follow. I'm Valeria Bullo. I am currently working at Cafe. I've been there for about 5 years. My background is all physical production, so I worked my way up through the production ladder, ranging from documentaries, independent and big budget feature films.
My name is Matimba, Kabilika. I work at the BFI. I'm part of the BFI Film Fund, and I look after the BFI network, which is part of the team that looks after new and emerging talent. So everybody who hasn't made a first feature, look after that. That's a kind of across the UK. We work with lots of different people, and so my job is to find new writers, directors, producers, and try and help people get their films made.
And as I said, I'm Rhianna Dhillon. I'm a film critic and I'm a broadcaster. Our panel has actually asked to find out a little bit about you guys, so we can sort of know where to pitch the conversation. So, how many of you are, budding filmmakers, kind of looking to make a film, have already perhaps made your first film?
Yeah, that's really good to know. That's awesome.
So, have you already made your first film, short films?
Good.
Okay, this is already good. Any of you kind of want to know?
Yeah. So so people made short films with no money, just on your own. Raise your hand. Okay. And people made short films, let's just say up to 10 and 15 grand. Okay, and 20 grand and up. Okay, and are people still wanting to make short films and find out how to get money for that type of stuff? Raise your hand. Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I also just to say that Rebecca Long unfortunately can't be with us right now, which is a shame. But we will carry on. So first of all, I kind of want to, get to grips with some of the myths behind financing. Does securing a budget for your film, is it all about who you know?
Can we have the framing?
Should we start with you, Kate?
I think having a lot of connections helps, but I think to gain those connections, for me, it's always been about producing work and building your audience and building up your social media, and that's usually what helps get other people interested. The worst thing you can do is kind of sit around hoping someone will finance your script. The best thing you can do is take what money you've got, start developing your style, start finding your voice as a filmmaker, start finding your identity and build on that, and that will start attracting people to you. The moments in my career when I've been I've got this project and I need X amount of money, and I'm just going to keep badgering people for it, have been the moments when I've ended up not doing very much. But the moments when I've been a bit more proactive and I've gone, right, I've got this script, I've got a little bit of cash, let's make it, have been the things that have led to bigger things in my career. And I think that's something that, for me, is something you'll always go back to. The most important thing is to be proactive, and then you will attract people to you and you will build your connections. I came to London with no connections in film. I don't have my family are not filmmakers. But if you keep pushing work out there and you keep going to those events, you will build those connections. It's not impossible to do.
I have a very similar background to you, as in I came to the film industry and to London without any contacts. I mean, quite differently, as in I have not financed my own films. But I think as much of a cliche as it might sound, that networking, going to the film festivals, LFF, if you can, Cannes or Berlin, it really does make such a huge difference to who you're meeting and people who are interested in developing talent. There's a lot out there at the moment for discovering new talent nationally and internationally. So there are opportunities there, but you need to sort of get out there, get known, meet people, and find out also what's available, what funds are available to you.
Last question. Is there going to be a time when these guys can ask us?
Yes, we're going to have a bit of 15, 20 minutes at the end. Yeah, so
In terms of who you know, I think it depends. There's a point when I think making stuff on your own is great and is always helpful. You know, at the point that I'm looking for filmmakers, it's when people are making stuff that probably might not be funded. So just because your work isn't funded, you know, my job is to find those people. That's what. So I think the idea of knowing you can know lots of people and your work still might not excite the people who want to give you money. So, and your work might not be for everyone. So it's kind of having an idea of, I think to Kate's point, having an idea of the filmmaker that you want to be, the types of things that you're passionate about, and that you can articulate that stuff so that when you do meet people, you're able to say, I really love this kind of stuff, and you know, so that you kind of, building a community is important. And I think sometimes people think it's important to immediately know people who can fund you, whereas actually I think it's equally, if not more important in the beginning, to find brilliant collaborators who are on the same level as you that you can kind of progress with. So you might have made something for no money with a brilliant producer, and you might be a writer-director. It's kind of like, okay, how do we make that, how do we go up? Because I think what people want to see at the point when they want to invest money in you is how that money can help your career progress. So it's yes, it's about the money, but it's also about what that money will be doing. So a lot of the time, you know, we're excited to help people where we can go, I can see what they're going for, and actually if we support them with this money and also this professional development, all that other stuff, then we can see how their career, how we can go up a level. So, yeah.
So in your job, how often do you actually work with first-time filmmakers, producers? Is that primarily who you work with?
Yes, that's primarily who I work with. Sometimes it's people who might have made, you know, one thing or two things on their own. That's something I feel quite passionately about personally, is I quite like, it doesn't have to be, I think people think it's about making it perfect or like having high production value or having a name in the cast. It's kind of like that's not what it's really about. It's about, we have lots of different priorities. This is specifically as the BFI, but you know, in terms of, that's another thing you need to kind of know when you're talking to someone on the other side is, you know, what is it that they want out of their money? So lots of people have different things. There are lots of schemes where it might be like, oh, we're looking for this or that. So figure out who aligns with what you're kind of looking for. But for us, we've got stuff that we've said in our strategy that we're really excited about, and it's, you know, everything from supporting diverse voices, supporting people outside of London, supporting bold new ideas, people who are experimenting with form and platform. So I'm really open and always, again, looking for new voices. So yeah.
Like you say, there are so many ways of securing funding. Crowdfunding comes up an awful lot in those conversations. How useful is it? Does it work?
I think crowdfunding is very useful, but I think there's a time to do it. I don't necessarily think it might be the best thing to do at the beginning of your career. I think it's something to do when you've built a bit of audience and you're looking to build audience. People see crowdfunding as, oh, let's raise money, but if you do that, you're probably just going to get your friends and family. Whereas if you look at crowdfunding as audience building, audience engagement, I know a company up in Scotland who've just raised 100k for a feature film, for the post-production of a feature film, and they've done that through having a loyal audience who every time they do a crowdfunding campaign will put money into their projects because they love what they're doing. So I think the best time to do crowdfunding is when you've got a little bit of audience, you've built a bit of social media following, you've got people engaged who are outside of your friendship group and are within potentially a genre. I think it's also good to start out in a genre. That can be very helpful. I started out in the horror genre, and that's definitely been beneficial to me. But once you've started to build a bit of an audience to your work, that is a good point to crowdfund, because once again it can snowball and you use the initial audience you've got to build audience. I'm a big believer that filmmakers are responsible for their own audience. It isn't down to somebody else. You can find your audience and you can get an audience to connect to your work. And that is something that's very beneficial, and I think makes you look more appealing to someone who's financing or wanting to push forward your career, because you have the fledgling audience there that can be built upon.
I think crowdfunding can be a lot of work. It is a lot of work. So I think, again, when you're starting out in those early days, think about what you actually really need the money for, because I think sometimes people will send me a link and go, I made this short film and I raised £50,000. I'm like, well, okay, like that doesn't matter. Nobody cares how much money it costs to make. I mean, like what you're looking at is like, what's the finished product? So actually, if you've got an idea and it's banging, and you actually don't need £50,000, you need £500. Make a brilliant film for £500, rather than me being like, what? Because actually, when you're watching something that's not great, it's just you're thinking, gosh, where did all this money go? So actually, kind of, I think sometimes people have an idea that people who are looking to support people want to see that you've done stuff with lots of budget, and that's just not necessarily true. It's what you've done with what you have.
Valeria, do you have any examples of where you haven't been hugely successful in raising funds for a film?
Well, I think for sort of our particular kind of films, it sort of doesn't really branch into these sort of, particularly crowdfunding. We tend to fund our films always quite in the same way. We collaborate with the BFI or BBC Films or Film 4. So we work with co-financiers, and we, raise the money for our own films, sometimes through pre-sales. So we will always sort of use the same formula in terms of making our films. It's kind of like a studio structure, but it's similar to that, but in a smaller way. So our budgets tend to be between 8 to 10 million quid, and we try not to sort of go, definitely try not to go over that. So if we've been unsuccessful in sort of financing a film, we've really messed up. So we're in big trouble. So it's a slightly different kind of model in terms of the type of films that we make.
But it's quite interesting though that even on that scale, there's a similar, you're working within parameters, and it's kind of looking at the material, looking at the budget that it needs, and how those pieces come together.
Absolutely, so. And connecting to sort of what you were saying, the question earlier about first-time filmmakers, there is something to be said, and I'm sure lots of other companies do that, but we track everything, we track everyone, we go to see everything, so whether it's a short film festival or a feature film or theatre, so what people are doing, whether it's technical crew, directors, writers, so we are aware of what people are making, and if there's good material coming from places, it's definitely on our radar.
Where does that buzz come from? If you're kind of been told, oh, you must go and see this person's work, like who are you listening to?
Reviews and the success of whatever, whether it's the short film or the play, the production value, sometimes TV work, so somebody who's, done a sensational, I know recently there was a very British scandal was, everybody was talking about it, and so you're kind of looking at everything that's being represented. So, and I think also your own judgment. So if there's really high production value, if this film is fantastic, then the material speaks for itself.
Kate, so you were a director, writer and producer.
And editor and art department.
Oh my goodness. Egomaniac.
Oh gosh.
You were a wonderful
Oh gosh.
show.
The nightmares are coming back. It's all coming back.
I mean, how did you do it? How do all those different hats fit together?
Basically the film got made in a year, and that included writing the script, making it, editing it. So the whole process was a year. During the 3 months of production, where I was doing considerably a huge amount myself, I think I got 4 hours sleep a night. But then once again, it's what you have to do. And it was like, do I sit around waiting for a producer to fall in love with my work and make this film? Or do I just get this wonderful team that I know, this wonderful crew, and go out and make this film? And it was mad. I mean, for a £5,000 film, usually those are one location films. We had 11 locations, 10 crew, and 22 cast. So it was nuts.
Crazy.
But you can logistically work it out. What I would recommend to anyone who's making a no-budget feature, and I do strongly recommend people consider no-budget features, because I found personally that's acted more as my calling card than any of my shorts. But
Sorry, just quickly, short, no budget and low budget. Tell us the difference.
No budget, I would say, is anything. Usually, I think it's considered anything under 50,000. But I would say no budget. I mean, £5,000 is no budget. Like, there's not any room for any error and mistake. And I know when we were filming, like, I would literally have nightmares before the shoot, because I was like, if this location doesn't let us in, we're not going to be able to find any money to actually solve it. But my advice to anyone who wants to go down that route is find out who you are as a filmmaker and decide what your unique selling points are. For me, what I'm good at is I love working with art department, and I'm also really good with actors, and I know a lot of actors. So I made the film very heavily based on good locations, good art department, and good actors. And because of that, we sacrificed camera and we sacrificed other elements, but you can't have it all on a no-budget feature, but you can pick the elements that essentially are you. And what's interesting is moving on to a bigger budget where there is a lot more money and there's a lot more stuff, discussions. Still, my focus is actually, you know what, my areas as a filmmaker is working with art department and working with actors. Those are the two areas that I really love and thrive at, because that's who you are as a filmmaker. I think every filmmaker has their specific department and area where they particularly have their unique selling point. So I think when you make something no budget, don't try and cover everything, because you're not going to be able to. Decide what your unique selling points are, ask those really honest questions, and then you put your money into that.
This is something for, I think, all three of you be able to answer this, but does casting well-known actors, for example, help in terms of securing bigger budgets because people are more willing to invest?
Well, again, I think it depends on who those people are. Like, it depends what that investment is looking for, and that's something that is really crucial for you to know before you kind of get tangled up with committing to taking money. Is like, what does that person want? So, like I said, for speaking from a BFI perspective, that money, the network, is there to support the the writer, director, producers. So it's not important about cast at all. And actually, and this is just me personally, I'm more excited to see a performance that someone can bring out of somebody I didn't know. I think sometimes having somebody quite known can almost burden it, because actually you have an idea of what that person can do. You're bringing so much, and I think sometimes you're going, oh, I expect that person to do this. So, for example, if they deliver a bad performance, it's kind of like, oh, you know what I mean? Yeah. It starts. So that's just me personally, though. You might manage to get somebody brilliant, and it helps you get money, and it's crucial to the film. But again, I think in the early stages of your career, it's about what does the project need? Does the project need 50,000? Does the project need Daniel Kaluuya? Does the project, okay, yes, maybe there's a thing where it's, what's that short he did Baby, where it's like, he wasn't what who he is now, but he made that short, and it's brilliant for him, and it's also brilliant for the director. So sometimes I think also figuring out who's the person who would be that next person. I think as a director, isn't it exciting to discover someone and bring a brilliant performance out of someone that everyone goes, gosh, who's that person, and also who's that director? So I think, it's about the material, and it's about what you want to do with it.
You seem to be agreeing there, Damien.
Yeah, I would personally agree. I think it is about discovering talent. I do think, from personal experience, I do think what I found has sometimes been helpful has been having someone who might have a bit of a cult following, having someone a little different, having the, like, in Egomaniac, we had the star of Human Centipede 2 in a role where which was a full send-up of himself. Okay. Like a full, complete send-up of himself. And for him, it was a very funny role, and he was like, oh, this is really different, and he was really funny in it. But actually, even just that has actually brought more audience to the film, because they're like, oh, it's Lawrence Harvey. Gosh, yeah, I want to see him in another film. So on a smaller level, I think it can help, because it can, when you are at a small level, you want to bring as much audiences as possible. But I do think the heart of it is discovering new talent and finding that next big voice and that next unique person.
Yeah, well,
whoops. Well, we would definitely count on big names that can add obviously fantastic performances to our films, and that maybe want to collaborate, ours or not. I know 10 million quid might sound like a huge amount of money, but working with actors who are usually used to working on much bigger productions, maybe the material is attracting them, but it's definitely a selling point for us. It's a huge aspect of the importance of the film. I don't know, I mean, when we did Selma, which is the Ava DuVernay film about Martin Luther King, you know, it was quite a small budget to have such a huge cast on that, you know, David Oyelowo and Oprah and Cuba Gooding Jr., you know, I mean, it was a huge ensemble cast. And so they were obviously so passionate about the material that they were willing to, you know, to do it for, you know, much less money than what they would normally do because it was such a great film. But, you know, we do take our own risks. You know, Ava's Selma was, I think, her second feature. And then after that she went on, I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen The 13th, which is an amazing documentary on Netflix. And then she recently directed a Disney film called A Wrinkle in Time. So, you know, so it's a very different kind of structure for us because it really does kind of catapult our films to a wider audience. So we do sort of count on that too.
So it sounds like different advice, but it's kind of the same because it's about it's about progression.
Absolutely.
It's about the how you can see obviously how the money means different things. Obviously, if somebody gives you £10,000 and let's just say, you know, it doesn't end up at the Oscars, that doesn't really matter. So I guess it's different. We're talking about £10 million because so the money, and that's what's kind of saying to people about, and again, it's about the material. That material, you know, Selma needed that cast.
Absolutely.
How important is it to have that calling card of that film, the one that you can take to, because obviously you've got to make that at some point.
Well, I don't think you have just one calling card. I feel like I've had a number of calling cards, and each new project is a new calling card. Like having a no budget feature is a great calling card, but one thing I've realized is actually a lot of people don't have time to watch a 70-minute feature to know how good it is. So it can be good to have a short and a no budget feature, one to prove that you do long content, one that's a quick thing that people can watch and go, yeah, I get a sense of who you are. I think it's essential, but as I say, I don't think you just have one calling card. I think you have a number, and if you go into a film going, this is my sole calling card, this is the thing that's going to make it, chances are it's going to not work. Yeah. Whereas if you just keep making stuff, improving your creativity, improving your art, understanding your voice more and more, perfecting what you do, each one of those pieces you can send out to people and people can connect with. And I think we're moving into an area where it isn't a calling card, it's a portfolio. And it's a body of work, because people, they see that you've done one good short film, they're like, that's great, but can you do it again? But if you have a repeated portfolio of things where it's like, yes, I have done this, yes, I've done this, yes, I've done this, then all of a sudden people raising that question of, oh, can they do it again? Can they do it on a big budget? It de-risks yourself. And I think one thing that you have to be mindful if you're a director in my position is de-risking yourself as someone to invest in by proving that you can keep doing it, that you're not just a one-hit wonder, that there is multiple things that you can do. But that is just from my personal experience. But I don't believe you have one calling card. I think every project that you do is your next calling card.
I think it also depends on what kind of career you want to have. Not everybody wants to have the same type of career, so there isn't one size fits all. So again, when you're hearing all this advice, you need to kind of put it through the prism of what type of filmmaker you are and what type of filmmaker you want to be. But in terms of at the point where, again, someone like me, my job is to help unearth new talent and then help that talent progress to the point where they will be making a feature. So there is a point where we want to look at that progression. So say somebody's been given 5,000 and they make something, then they might make a bigger short at 10,000 or 15 or however much. Then there'll be a point when, let's just say they apply to the wider BFI Film Fund for a production award for a first feature. You're then in this editorial space where there's 11 or 12 people and you might be asking for 800,000 of a £2 million budget. What people want to see is how you progress. So there will be a piece of work which will probably within that be the strongest work, where you're kind of saying, yeah, you trusted me with this and now I can do this. So if you do go down that route, there will be a point where there will be a piece of work that you make that people will kind of talk about as the thing. And, you know, to Valeria's point, that that you know, Ava's film, I think it's called I Will Follow, that kind of won at Sundance, which was really small. I think it was like $200,000. But that would have been the thing that made somebody go, actually, do you know what? Yeah, she's talented, and that film's, you know, it's not big budget, it's not showy, but what you can see there is that she gets some brilliant performances, and so that will then give somebody the confidence to go, if she could do it at that, then she can do it at that level.
So I want to move on a little bit to like what you spend the money on. Where does it go? So Valeria, you have to often, I think, analyse and evaluate budgets. So like, have you noticed a shift in where the money goes, what is being spent most on?
Well, I think definitely things have changed from a sort of general perspective. I think technology has had a huge impact on various departments. I think a lot of productions, at least a lot of our productions, are being encouraged and everywhere to, you know, be more eco-friendly and therefore go paperless and less plastic. So, for example, you know, back in my day, when I was working as a coordinator, you know, and this is what I presume most people will use is, you know, with your daily paperwork distribution or, you know, scripts and everything else, you know, you set up your email address and you email everyone. Whereas now all our productions are looking to use these very secure, so GDPR, but very secure paperless systems. So it's like software. One in particular is called Synchronize, which is used for slides, for script revisions, for sending out call sheets. But they're pretty expensive pieces of software. You know, so you're looking at like 12 or 13 grand just to have a piece of software to do daily paperwork distribution, which on a regular film or low budget film, you know, or even a film that I would have worked on before, I've never had that sort of access. As well, you know, if you look at the camera department, of course, you know, switching from film to digital, even though now, ironically, film can be cheaper. You know, digital making filmmaking more accessible to everyone. You know, you can now go out and shoot a film on an iPhone, you know, Tangerine being the best example. So, you know, with the switch to digital, you also then have potentially a lot of expensive kit, so that goes with it. So even though it's become maybe more accessible, it's also more expensive. And even rather interestingly, on a production we had recently, even places like the costume department, you know, there was one costume supervisor had invested in, you know, it was like a 500 quid desktop laser printer, where she had basically cut costs of what you would normally spend. So in this particular example, it was to make some leather parts for a Roman kind of medieval type costume for extras. And, you know, because of the craftsmanship nowadays, you would fly to like Italy or Spain and go to a lab where they're the only places that still make these types of materials. So you've got flying someone there, you've got labor costs, then you've got shipping. Whereas they had this laser printer, which was then cutting everything identical, so you have complete control over the material, time, you don't have any shipping costs. Okay, you're investing in your laser printer, but you're saving on all these other costs. So I think for me, the biggest kind of changes is definitely from a technology point of view that's making things easier, faster, and also more accessible.
Kate, what is the most ridiculous thing that you've ever had to budget for?
Oh, I was wondering whether I was excited about this question or dreading it. The most ridiculous thing that I have ever brought for one of my films was something called a Mr. Limpy.
Okay.
Which, I don't know if I should be saying this, but it is a flaccid penis sex toy.
It's going to be something to do with the penis.
And it comes in multiple sizes. We went for the small because it was most realistic, but I basically needed
and cheapest, presumably.
And cheapest. But I needed an SFX penis, and it was my first film, and we were shooting it on £500, and I didn't have the connections to find someone to make me one, so I did the brave thing of typing into Google, you know, fake flaccid penises and a Mr. Limpy, and I have found recently that they still sell them. So if anybody needs a cheap penis for their film, you can get a Mr. Limpy.
That raise any eyebrows with your financiers?
Well, the financier was me.
Oh,
So
like,
I think
God,
it was
what am I
just a
doing?
deep questioning in myself of what has happened in my life. What is the direction I'm going in? Recently, for my web series I've just filmed, we did find proper iron shackles, and there's a guy on eBay who makes iron shackles for what he describes as the more authentic bondage experience, which was quite. So yeah, this is the crazy stuff I end up ordering with my films. But I think the ultimate one is the Mr. Limpy.
Good. I'm never going to get that out of my head. Matimba, are there common mistakes that first-time filmmakers often make in terms of budgeting?
Yeah, I think people always try and cut corners in the places you shouldn't cut corners, and then it's kind of, I think what's really hard when you're making films and you don't have much money is kind of figuring out where the money needs to go. And I know I sound like a broken record, but again, it's about the material. So there's no point being like, we're going to spend all this money on wardrobe and blah 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 if you actually don't really need it. If you can kind of do it, it's about deciding where you really need to put the money. Again, that's the kind of thing about having a named person, a big cast person. If you don't have much money and you're going to end up spending, even if they say, okay, yeah, I don't need a fee or whatever, I'll do it for a small fee, you need to take care of them and blah blah blah, and then that's the cost, and then there's people looking after them, and then that's the cost. So it's just figuring out what is going to, at the end of the day, what's going to give you the best film, and looking at the budget that way. I think a lot of people think of budgeting or stuff that producer says, oh, like that's something else, and I don't want to think of it. And it's like in those early stages, it's a creative process of figuring out how you can make the most brilliant film with a small amount of money. People never put in contingency, and you're like, even at that in the beginning, even if you've got like £500, if I'm just saying it's I don't know, 10,000, but you just having a bit of contingency, because once you're going and something happens, you kind of, once you're going, and you can't stop that machine. So making sure that you've got a line in case a little back pocket is kind of...
And that's still the case for no budget things as well. You've still got to have a little bit in place.
So is it, people forget about like catering or accommodation or even festival screeners. Is it those things that get sort of forgotten about in the flurry of actually making the film?
Well, I think on our films, if people forget to budget something, again, we're in really big trouble. But I completely agree with Matimba, and I think, there's areas that we will always encourage that there's enough contingency for, or that there's enough budget in, which are, I don't know whether they're forgotten about, but they're definitely always slightly under budgeted, which are post. Post is such a big aspect, your mix and your grade, music. You might end up finding that you have, some crackle in your sound, and, things that can easily be resolved, hopefully, with a bit of post-production. So post is definitely an area that I would always encourage, because, to be honest with you, no one ever forgets about catering. They always remember to feed everyone, which is great, and it's the way it should be. And you're right, sometimes money is, thrown at trying to please the talent, but it's really, put that money on the screen. It needs to go to your film and not to the sort of aspects. And post, unfortunately, is an area that often might get a little bit forgotten about. So it's the expensive kit, maybe you have a DOP who wants to use a really fancy camera because he wants to try it out. But, even, if you can afford it, but a bit of VFX, you might have a crowd replication, or, there's little things that, there are amazing deals that you can do with post-production houses and VFX houses that, could completely change the look or sound of your film.
I've heard producers before say that they sometimes feel like the bad guy because they have to go and tell a director that perhaps their vision isn't possible with the budget they've got. Is that actually quite problematic?
Is it problematic that is what?
Does that kind of cause a bit of tension in terms of, do you feel like the bad guy as producer saying this is not going to happen, this can't work, and how difficult is it being the no person rather than the yes?
Well, we're often in that position. So as financiers, we're also producers, and I think the thing to understand from that point of view is not to be the bad guy and not to say no, but it's working with the filmmaker to try and achieve those same results in a different way. So we have two films, one that we shot very recently and another film where one was entirely shot in the States, and the most recent film, so one was Florence Foster Jenkins, and our recent film was the Judy Garland project with Renee Zellweger, which had some scenes in the States, and there was just absolutely no way we could afford to go to the States, so fly everyone over or hire a crew there, and then you become subject to the American Guild, so there was just no room in the budget. So even though maybe the director really wanted to go and felt, because it was set in New York, and New York has such a distinctive look, and Manhattan, we cheated all of that. We shot all of that in Liverpool, in London, and not with huge VFX either. You can become more creative. On Judy, we needed an LA mansion again. We couldn't afford, but the LA light, you can cheat that with lights. Another good example, which is not one of our films, but Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool. They did quite a sort of a homage to the sort of style of filmmaking that would have been used at the time, and they'd used projection backdrops, for their American scenes. So I think it's about not saying no, but about trying to find solutions and working out how can I achieve that, and that can be a difficult process, but it's just about kind of keeping open and how can you kind of get to the same result but in a slightly different way.
I think there's never going to be enough money to make your film. Even when you talk about £10 million budgets, it sounds huge, but once you start breaking it down, it's never enough. So I think what's important from a directing point of view is, once again, knowing who you are as a director, knowing your unique selling points, and even on bigger budget films, trying to push the budget more in that direction than trying to do something that isn't actually true to who you are as a filmmaker, because I think that is the key thing, is to always know who you are as a filmmaker, and that will help in the definition of the budget, where the money goes to at any level, whether that's £5,000 or whether that's £10 million.
I agree. Obviously we're not producers on this one, we're a step removed, so we're supporting the producers, but I think it's, again, there'll be a point, then there always is a point to as these guys have both said, that no matter what budget level you're looking at, things will have to be compromised. And again, I think that's where that's the art of being a filmmaker. So you have to think of it creatively, and everybody who's in the mix, no one's trying to make your film worse. Everyone wants to make your film better. And I think producers are, obviously they're the MVPs. They are literally, they do so much work, they have so much responsibility, and I think they're there to support, they're there to make that film creatively better. So when someone says no, I think it's crucial, or if something has to be changed or compromised, it's crucial to, again, it's knowing what that film is, knowing what creatively, and kind of going, and it might not be because it's about money. Sometimes it's like, you were going to shoot this outside and now it's raining. You've got to abandon. You can't just be like, well, you've got to then kind of go, right, this was the plan, but what is intrinsic to the heart of the story to make it work, and how can we work around that?
I think, just as a final note, just to relatch onto something Matimba said earlier about, working with amazing collaborators, a lot of that creative vision that we were able to achieve was because we worked with amazing location managers who knew, this fantastic location that we could shoot as Carnegie Hall, or, this fabulous street in Liverpool that looked exactly like, 52nd Avenue or something like that. So it really is about, opening yourself up to that creative process and working with really good collaborators, really good people.
And to that point, sorry, this final point, but like 90% of the emails that I get are people saying, I need to find a producer. 90%.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's people. More people email me about producers than finding money.
Where do you point them?
Well, lots of places. There's lots of kind of resources. There's not a place where it's like, here's a list of producers, but I always say to people, again, it's like Valeria's saying, it's like going to coming to stuff like this, going to finding like who else is in this room, like who else has turned up on a Saturday, you know, to come and hear about film financing. You're probably in good company. So figuring out who's in the room and who you can collaborate with, and looking around places, whether it's BAFTA or BFI. There's lots of schemes at the moment in terms of building community. Like it's out there now more than ever, and just turning up to stuff, going to watching short films online and being like, who produced that? Great. Do you know what? I love that. Write to people, be like, I love that, and that's the type of film I want to make. Can we go for a coffee? You know, or can I send you my script? There are so many people, and it's like you need each other, and then you kind of go and look for the money. But it is crucial to kind of go, who out there is producing work, if you're not a producer, that you rate, or if you are a producer. Lots of producers, you know, come to me, less so producers, but a few producers come to me and go, who's out there that's exciting? And I'm like, there's, you know, you can just go online and watch loads of shorts and go, gosh, there's, you know, short of the week, there's loads of places where people are kind of highlighting great work, and figure out who's making it and write to people.
And I think also really make the most of social media. I think Twitter is such a powerful weapon as a filmmaker. I think a lot of the positive things and the connections that I've made and the good things that have happened to me have actually come through getting good at Twitter and knowing how to actually push a tweet, how to get people interacting. And I think that is such an essential skill, and one that you can build on. There is different classes out there which you can go to learn how to harness social media, because once again, it helps people see your work, and that attracts people to your work. So it's building your audience, it's getting people aware of your work. If you've got most of you have got short films. If you are sending them to festivals and it gets in, do you just say a little happy dance to yourself that it got into a festival? Or do you start plugging it on social media and letting everybody know that it's out there? And I generally think social media is just like networking, but it's just online. You can connect with other accounts. I have like a list of accounts that I'm well connected with that have got big followings, and if I want a big tweet to go out, I have an arrangement with them that I will tag them in the photo. They'll tweet it out, and at maximum we've had tweets reach about 10,000 impressions, which for an independent filmmaker and a no-budget film is good. And that is free publicity. It is all accessible to you, and you can all do that. And that's how you can, as an individual, increase your chances of finding a producer, increase your chances of gaining interest in you, by just putting that little bit of time in to not just getting good at filmmaking, but also getting good at branding and marketing yourself as well.
You said free publicity there. Just quickly, what other places can you go to where, like you say, you've got no budget, micro budget, and you need to like beg, borrow and steal? Like, who out there would kind of give you freebies, and how do you kind of make
in terms of freebies, like with everything that I've got free, it's come through being really nice and also returning a favour. And I think when you talk about freebies, you should always go, why would somebody give me this thing for free, and how can I make it to their benefit? How can I, if you've got crew that are working for free, how can you repay them back? Like, if you can't pay them back through money, is there other ways of doing it? I think the core thing that's been helpful to me has been starting out in a genre and starting out in a niche, because I got very connected with the Fright Fest crowd and the Fright Fest audience, and they have been hugely supported. When Egomaniac screened, they just were all over Twitter, and you can't buy that kind of interaction. That comes through connecting with people. And I think if you can put your work to begin with into a niche, the funny thing is, my work is more dark comedy than horror, but it's just connected with that audience. And I've been lucky enough to be a part of that audience, to embrace that audience, and them to have really helped push my work. And I think if you can start off in a small genre, it's easier to make connections than if you're going, oh, well, I just need to make connections in the film industry, because all of a sudden that pond gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and before you know it, you realise, actually, I've just connected with this person from Lionsgate, I've just connected with this person from here, but it's less intimidating, and you can get the support of a community and an audience. And that, for me, particularly in terms of publicity and promoting my films, where, it's a self-distributed film, we've had no money for publicity, what has got it out there has been starting out in a small genre, building an audience and building different connections with blogs, not big publicity, but small blogs. But then when you see that some of these blogs have 10,000 people viewing them a month, all of a sudden those numbers build and build and build, and that's stuff that you can do now. You don't need to be reliant on somebody else. You can all do that now.
This might sound a bit counterintuitive as well, but I think it's like, I think sometimes people as well, it's about your work ultimately as well. Like people, I contact more people because I like their work than because, you know, it's about the work. That's the first thing. Because I think a lot of people go, oh, well, that person knows these people. It's like, well, that person knows them for the most part because somebody liked their work. And so that's how, and actually, I think sometimes people feel like there's a particular person or set of people you need to know, blah, 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 but it's like, actually, again, and I know I keep repeating myself, but it's like, what kind of filmmaker do you want to be? Because it, you know, you might be the type of person who wants to make your own thing, wants to work outside, and it's not important for you to know someone like me because, you know, you're doing your own thing, and that's great. It's kind of figuring out who are your champions, who are the people who are going to champion the work that you're doing. Not everyone's work will be for everyone, and by the way, there's people whose work I've seen, you know, you might have submitted something a couple of times and said no, and then the first thing they kind of made on their own was the thing that you're like, oh wow, actually that was really exciting. And to Valeria's point, there's a lot of people who are constantly tracking from everywhere, constantly. So lots of the time, people also might not get in touch with you immediately about the first thing because, you know, if you're working at Pathé and you've made a £10,000 short, which is good, you're not going to make a £10 million film next, probably. So they might be tracking you, but it might not be at that point. So again, it's just making sure that it's all in the work and that you put all your effort and energy there, and anything else that kind of comes out of that, it should be speaking, it should be harnessing that. And even stuff like festivals, it's like, instead of just spending all your money submitting to every festival, why don't you look at some of the short films that they've programmed in previous years and gone, actually, seems like whoever's programming there feels like that's where my work might sit.
That's really good
and
advice.
be quite strategic about it. So there's there's being creative and there's being strategic, and the two can go alongside each other.
I think also handling rejection with grace as well is a really important thing. Like, some of the best connections I've made have actually been people who have rejected my work, but they really loved it, but it just wasn't the right thing. But then you just go, well, if you like it, can we go for coffee, blah, blah, blah. And then you go for coffee and you end up getting on, and all of a sudden it wasn't a rejection of your work because it was bad. It was because it's just not the right fit for this particular thing. But if you can handle rejection with grace and turn rejection to your advantage, those connections 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line end up actually being very valuable when you are doing a bigger budget project that may be more beneficial to that, you know, to where they are at the moment. So I think really, even though rejection is hard, learn to handle rejection with grace, and I found that has been a very useful thing.
Thank you so much. We're now going to open it up to you guys. So if you have any questions, we have a roving mic, I think. So if you could just put your hand up and the mic will come to you. We have a question right down the front here. I know it's a long way for you to run. I'm sorry. This lady just here.
Hi. So I was wondering, like, you were talking about Twitter being used to connect with people on top of the normal networking. I've kind of noticed, like, being on LinkedIn and stuff, that there's not a lot of film people on it. So do you have any other websites of, like, this Hive as well, and just, like, your recommendations?
I mean, my recommendation with everyone on social media is, don't, for me, and some filmmakers would strongly disagree with this, for me, don't try to do every single social media, because before you know it, you will spend more time on social media than you're filmmaking, and you don't want to do that. You want to be spending 10, 20 minutes top on your social media building. Choose the social media that's right for you. Everyone has different social media that works. I think it's good to have a primary source and a secondary source. So my primary source and my first focus is Twitter, and that is the one that I've managed to get the most reach on. I also have my Facebook as well, which is a bit more industry connections than necessarily just audience, but I don't do Instagram because if I add another one in there, I don't really want to be spending all my time doing social media. And you do get some people, some creatives who you get this real impression they're on social media more than creating, and I think that's a really bad impression. So whatever social media works for you, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Instagram, whether it's some random new one that's just come out, choose the one that works best for you and the one that you connect with and the one that you can communicate with. That is, like, always, and like, have one as your main focus and then maybe have another one. one thing I'll also say is if you are a filmmaker and you're promoting yourself on social media, you no longer have personal social media. You know, like when people are like, oh, I have my personal Twitter account, my professional Twitter account. No, like people will judge you on your personal Twitter. So if you're like having a big, massive political rant or stuff like that, you can actually get quite judged on that. So for me, all my social media is highly professional. I don't go into personal opinions on anything. I keep it all very focused on my work and the work that I want to promote. And I do think that is something that I do think a lot of people do look at your social media and see you as a person and how you present yourself as a professional.
Thank you. Have we got any other questions? Yeah, gentleman just over there.
Hello. About monetizing short films. This is a question that I usually ask people that know what they're talking about, because getting your return on investment on a short film is really, really difficult. And most people say, yeah, YouTube, but because it takes so much time and effort and money to make a short film, then put it on YouTube. The number of views is not actually going to determine how much money you get. So is there actually a way to monetize short films instead of just making them so you can make a feature film?
I will put my hands up and be totally honest. I think the most money that my work has made has been like £150. Like, I have never made any money from anything that I've made, and when I have, it's gone back to paying people that I've done it, that I needed to in profit share and all that. But to be honest, like, I have never made any money from my work. But for me, that's not the focus of what I'm interested in at the moment, because you're not, when you make a £5,000 feature, you're not interested in making money, you're interested in people watching it. I mean, I've uploaded my feature onto YouTube. I uploaded it through a YouTube channel called Hex Media that had a good following. And I mean, that's we've got about, I think, 750 views, and it's getting it gets 50 views, 100 views a day. And it keeps constantly building audience, and that doesn't sound like much, but in the grand scheme of things. But once again, it's slowly building an audience and getting people to connect with your work. And for me, with everything that I've made, it's been about getting it into festivals, getting people to, and now I'm getting a bit more driven into connecting it with people online. When I spent that money, I kind of realized that was money that was never going to come back, but I see it as an investment into my own career. And that can be hard and it can be difficult. And trust me, I had to move, after Egomaniac, I literally looked at my bank account. I had I think I had 39 pence of my overdraft left and all my savings gone, and I had to move back with my parents for 6 months. So I know how difficult it is, but it's once again deciding, why are you making that film? Is it a showcase for you? Is it to connect with your audience? Is it a calling card? Or is it to make money? Because you can make, low budget, no budget features that make money, but I think they can often be very different kind of features. Or short, and with shorts, I mean, I've never monetized a short. I wouldn't have a clue where to. So sorry if that answer doesn't make you rich.
Yeah,
I apologize.
That's the first honest answer I've heard about it. So
Yay!
In terms of corporate filmmaking, if you're making a short film for a corporation, is that, if you are looking to monetize, is that a feasible direction to go in?
It's a direction you can go in, and I think, if you can attach a company that could potentially help promote it and stuff, then but once again, it's what kind of filmmaker do you want to be? What is it that you want to promote? I think honestly, at your stages now, guys, the thing that you should be focusing on is discovering who you are, your voice, experimenting, trying new things out, and just understand who you are. Because when you do reach a bigger position and you are making bigger films, one of the most important things to me is just always going back to, who am I as a filmmaker? What is it that I want to make? And that level of confidence and understanding of yourself is so important when you do step up onto bigger projects.
I think just in relation to the question about corporate film, I mean, it really does depend. I did some corporate film at the very beginning of my career, but you know, you're working to agree, you know, you're not making a short film entirely creatively and, you know, for the joy of it, and then you have someone attached. You know, you work to a brief, you have a client, they have most creative control over the film that you're making, and so it's completely restrictive from that point of view. It's definitely not, which is the reason why I left that industry, because, you know, you have so many people involved in the creative process that you actually, you know, have no room to kind of express your idea, even from a production point of view. So yeah, so it really does depend.
We've got time, for one more question. Yeah, just in the middle of this row.
Just a quick question, mainly for like development as a young creative. Like Matimba, you said that, you know, you help try and find funding and stuff like that. But in terms of like actually developing, like as an artist, in terms of creativity and like making sure the work is up to par, is that something that you do as well? And do you know of any other schemes? Because I've heard of like Master Crew and things like that, but they often have certain requirements that, like maybe a credit on a TV show that's already out or coming out, that some people might not necessarily have at that stage in their career.
Yeah, that's a good question. We do lots of other things as well as like Master Crew, so definitely look up on the network websites. In England we've just set up, didn't really talk about it, but we set up the new hubs, and I don't know if you've had a look at that, but in London that would be through Film London, and us at the BFI we're going to be doing lots of kind of events and surgeries and lots more like masterclasses and stuff like that, just for people, as you say, who are just kind of wanting to hone their craft before a stage where they might be applying to network by Crew or network at LFF or Flair. But there are lots of those types of things, and there's more of that type of stuff popping up.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people are always like, there are some people who might not have got funding, but I might know that through one of those schemes, and it might not be a perfect fit for us, but they might be doing more artist moving image work or, you know, different stuff. So definitely have a look out for more of that stuff, and it's going to be end of the summer, mostly autumn, early autumn. We're going to have more of those.
Yeah, definitely. Film London, they have lots of new schemes, but there's a huge amount of interest at the moment in bringing out emerging talent nationally. So not just London centric, but, you know, lots of regional funds as well as schemes. So you should definitely root around, because there's a lot of stuff out there.
And the new funding as well, just for anyone who might not be aware of it, or if you Google BFI Network and that'll pop up, there's lots of new funds as well. There's new, there's funding for early development of feature ideas. So if you're, for example, a writer and you might not have a producer and you're working on an idea for a feature film, and actually what you need is to help work with an exec and a bit of funding to do some research, or just to get a strong treatment together, you can apply for that. And there's also funding for short film, and all of that's now available on a rolling basis, because I think before, I don't know if anyone's ever applied to, I don't know, an iShorts or London Calling, they used to do it once a year, and it's like, so now it's all rolling. So you should definitely apply if you haven't already, if you've got ideas.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you to our wonderful panel for joining us today. Thank you, Martin. And thank you guys as well for coming and taking part. Thanks.
Oh no, you can't then leave the applause half going, she's only halfway here. You know what I mean? Come on, you sit in the middle.
Do I sit close?
Sit in the middle, sit in the middle.
Oh God, yeah, this is...
Sit in the middle, because if you sit closer to Rihanna, you'll offend me.
I blame
and if you sit
Iari
closer to me, you'll
entirely for
offend
the layout
Rihanna,
of this.
clearly. Congratulations on the film. This is not even the first time I'm programming it for an event, so just, I mean, it's a very, very good film. I'm sure everybody's about to find that out. So tell us about your role with the kind of making of the film.
So I was the producer, and I had Daphne and Emily. Emily's the writer, Daphne is the director. Come to me and they were like, we have this idea and we have a financer. We just need to like match the two. And they'd met this financer at a film festival, and he was basically like, prove yourself to me so you can get the money. So then they were like, okay, we need to come up with a business plan. So we came up with this sort of business pitch. And I was like, for me, I think doing like equitable practices was my main thing. So I pitched it as an all-female crew without having, you know, the idea of who this crew was, which actually took 3 months to crew up in the end, because trying to find a female grip with, you know, a high enough sort of standard, and trying to find all these different women, a woman who could do a, you know, we had this 6 minute, which we cut in the end, cut up a 6 minute continuous shot on a steady cam, which starts outdoors and it goes indoors. It was actually really difficult. And, you know, for crew, I mean, to do 3 months, and then we filmed in a week was, you know, it was just such a quick turnover, and it was actually really terrifyingly fun. But I did, as Kate was saying, you know, I get like 4 hours sleep a night. I remember driving back on the motorway, very tired. But yeah, that was, I mean, and then we pitched it to a load of festivals. We've now got into just around 20 festivals. We've won quite a few awards, and you know, it's opened up doors for everybody. I was really supporting every single crew member, and if you're not paying people, even if you are paying people, those are the people, those are your teammates. And like, so everyone has actually gone on now working in BBC, TV, Netflix, and pitching more films and getting funding for features. So, you know, look after the people who are around you all the time. It's very important.
So because the theme today is all about like money, essentially. So what can you tell us about how you raised the funds and what it cost? And
so we were very lucky. We got 70,000 for this.
Yikes!
And this was basically it was about who we knew, because we were like a team. You know, whenever we went to a film festival, we were like, okay, you're going to take that corner, I'm going to take this corner, we're going to go there. See you in like 10 minutes. And we would go around and we would be like, we have this great idea, like this is what we want to, this is what we represent, this is what we want to do. And people got excited. If you're excited about what you do, if you're passionate about what you do, and then you have all the logistics down, people want to support that. You know, you go to weird places, like all bar one. I found a financer once because it was this finance guy who was like, you know, that's a glitz and glam world of filmmaking, and then was like, here's a load of money. So, you know, you got to start thinking outside the box.
I was in all bar one yesterday. No one offered me any money.
You just got to get people down quicker. But, you know, you've got to think outside the box where you're looking for money sometimes. And, you know, there are great schemes and everything like that, but sometimes there are people out there who want to get involved in the film world, and it's the passion and everything that you're making and all the fun stuff that you're doing that is what people want to invest in. There's a lot of people out there who don't know what to do with a lot of money. It's terrifying.
That's interesting. That is do you know what? I've been talking to a lot of people about film financing recently, and rich people who are angry about their tax bill are a real kind of group that you can approach. All right, this is a real thing. Okay, so if you know someone who's rich, right, and they're really angry about the amount of tax they have to pay, then talk to them. You might be able to help them out.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it weirdly works.
Does anybody know any rich people by now? Show of hands. No. Somebody's hand went up.
Everybody find her after this.
You know what I mean?
Like.
You guarantee that you will not be able to get out of the building easily today, girl. All right. So look, you know what? Thank you so much for coming. I think it kind of makes sense that we kind of take a look at the film.
Yeah. Please do.
Right.
And also just another thing, contingency. So important. You guys are saying this. Like, I started off making, you know, £100 like short films, and I didn't have a contingency plan. And, you know, that is your backup, and you will need it every single time. You will dip into that every single time. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has a very nice overdraft if you're in the creative industry. So you will understand that that is important.
What did you use your contingency for then? What was the
marketing?
Right.
Like, we did not realise how, and social media, again, you guys nailed it on the head. Social media is so important. Your audience is so important. And that's, I mean, even I act as well. People will look at your social media following now, and that's where they want to invest in, because that's audience, that's bums and seats, that's everything. Yes.
Yes. All right, well, let's, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Gemma. Give her a round of applause. Thank you to Rhianna for being an awesome presenter for the morning, and actually really kind of coping well with my poor organisation. And like, ladies and gentlemen, let's watch All of Me.
Enjoy.